This is the Oppo Find N3 and this is a OnePlus Open, and they're basically the same phone. They've got minor differences, software's a little bit different, but to all intents and purposes, they're both the best foldables that you can buy, in my opinion, right now. But don't trust me, because this is a biased review. I've worked with Oppo on the Find N3 launch, and I haven't written about it, I haven't covered it, because I haven't really trusted my own opinion on this phone. It's got so much cool stuff on it. I absolutely fell in love with it the more I used it. But because I was working in a commercial way with Oppo, I was, just aware that I couldn't have the journalistic integrity that I might have with any other phone that I cover. Since it launched though, I've really enjoyed seeing all the reviews because they pretty much corroborated every single thing I think about this phone. And the most impressive thing is that camera system. Now, the main camera is very good. It brings the same kind of sensor into play that the Sony Xperia 1 Mark V introduced and the 5 Mark V brought along. That Litia T808 stacked pixel technology sensor, 50 megapixel-ish resolution, obviously 48 megapixels given the different aspect ratio of the sensor. But long and short, it's got really good dynamic range. What's, in my opinion, better than the Sony phones is Oppo's photo processing, especially in that telephoto camera. This thing has a 64 megapixel OmniVision 3x telephoto camera. On paper, this should be mediocre at best. It's the same camera that was on the Reno 10 Pro Plus. But if you get to use this phone, it will blow you away. Oppo's computational photography plus the half-inch sensor from OmniVision changes the game. Product shots look amazing with this thing. And I've actually, for the first time, used the telephoto camera on a phone more than the primary camera. I'll talk about the camera in a little bit more detail later, but the rest of this phone is incredible as well. First off, it's relatively thin. It doesn't feel as thin as some phones which have curved sides, like the Honor Magic V2, for example, and it isn't quite as thin as that. But the flat sides give you something really nice to grip onto. The color options are really nice as well. You can pick it up with a black vegan leather, or if you opt for a OnePlus phone, this kind of green finish or a gold finish on the Oppo Find N3. You can also get the Oppo Find N3 in a vegan leather red, and that looks stunning. So they feel good. The glass finishes are frosted backs. They don't attract fingerprints too much. And the flat sides, grippy enough, but they don't feel unwieldy. The camera bump is huge. There's no getting around that. I personally don't mind that too much. You can see I'm balancing them pretty comfortably because the camera bump is kind of exactly where your index finger sits under. So the design when closed kind of feels just like a chunky smartphone. And to be honest, if I'm going to get a smartphone, I want it to be a chunky one. Why? Chunky smartphones probably mean you're going to get a better camera. Let's talk about physics, guys. If you want a good camera system on your phone, then you need a sensor that has enough distance from the lens to make good camera magic happen. And that is exactly what Oppo has done here. You haven't got a really thick body, but you do have a thick camera bump, and I am here for it. Okay, what else is awesome about this phone? On the right-hand side, you've got a OnePlus notification toggle. So it's an alert slider effectively, straight out of the OnePlus playbook, and it's on both the Oppo and OnePlus phones. And that's really, really handy when you open the phone out. Unlike with the Honor Magic VS, for example, the volume rock and power buttons are both on the right side. They haven't done one on the other and one on that. They haven't complicated things. It's simple and it works. You also open it out to a really gorgeous 7.8-inch tablet view, and when closed, it's a really comfortable 6.3-inch screen. Oppo and OnePlus have also made it nice and wide, so it's really easy to type on, and the screen quality is so good. Beams up to over 2000 nits peak brightness. That's exceptional. Now, is the phone's design perfect? Absolutely not. It hasn't got IP68 water and dust resistance, for example, but it does have IPX4 resistance, so it'll be able to handle rain, splashes, even though you can't necessarily dunk it. I've actually dropped this phone and it survived really, really well. Tiny, tiny scuff, and it dropped on concrete with a slight padding over the top. Ben Sin actually was cycling and this phone fell out of his pocket, and the OnePlus did at least, and it still worked after being dropped at like, he's fast, so I don't know how many miles an hour. But long and short, even though it isn't IP rated as high as Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 5, for example, it's still durable. And more than that, it's usable because you have a front screen that's wide enough and a larger inner display. And we've not even come on to why the UI is so good. Now, my biggest issue with foldables thus far is the fact you haven't necessarily had well-optimized interfaces. This is why Samsung Z Fold series has been probably the easiest to recommend, because a big screen inside has a really nicely optimized UI. But the UI on the OnePlus Open and the Find N3 is even better. And that's all because of what OnePlus calls infinite canvas and what Oppo calls boundless view. This feature lets you multitask across 3 apps in full screen view. And it really is that simple. It's like having 3 monitors that you just swipe across. Actually, going beyond that, if you use a Mac and you work across multiple windows or multiple displays, digital virtual displays as it were, with a 4-finger swipe, that's exactly what boundless view is like. And it changes the game. What's really smart and what Oppo's done is they've actually integrated that boundless view style in swiping across screens into split screen view. So you can have 2 apps in split screen and another app off to the side, and you can bring it into frame easily. So the interface is really nicely optimized, but going beyond that, it's also smooth, it's also stable, and obviously with Google Play Store support across both phones, it's really well optimized to just run all the key apps that I think most people will use nowadays. Multitasking across apps wouldn't really be that great an experience if there wasn't stacks of power in here, and the OnePlus Open and Find N3 have Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chips. Now, this may be the last generation of chipset. Personally, I'm not mad about it for a couple of reasons. First off, a lot of the recent news coming out about the 8 Gen 3 is that it isn't quite as power efficient, and for a foldable, you really want a power efficient chip. But simultaneously, everything runs super smoothly. I'm able to keep loads of apps running in the background with boundless view, all 3 apps up live at the same time. So it's not like one goes to sleep when it's off screen. It really has all the power I need. And with 16 gigabytes of RAM, you can keep loads of apps, I think about 70, open before one gets force closed, which means everything's going to open nice and quickly as soon as you need it. When it comes to the battery capacity, I really do get a comfortable day out of it. I use the camera on this thing a lot. I'm also really impressed by the heat management too. I've used the Galaxy Z4 Flip, for example, and I use the hotspot, Wi-Fi hotspot and wireless charging, and it will actually force close some of those features because it gets so hot. Foldables are really susceptible to overheating. The Find N3 specifically is the one I've been using recently, and I've been using the hotspot all day long and it's barely warm to the touch. It also charges really quickly with Oppo's SuperVOOC charging, and nothing gets this phone too toasty. Now, Oppo probably does apply a fair amount of thermal throttling, but the mere fact I haven't experienced slowdown while using it is great. Of course, Genshin Impact max graphics settings, that's probably going to max out this device, but if you drop the graphics settings a little bit, you'll both balance awesome battery life, decent performance, and that versatility of a really usable front screen and a really nice big inner display. And so, while this has been an overview of all of the aspects of the phone that I really like, I haven't quite come on to the camera in explicit detail, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. Okay, starting with the main camera, because that's probably the one that you'll be most interested in because it's that Sony Xperia 1 Mark V camera. The Litia T808 has a 1/1.43 inch size, so it isn't the biggest sensor out there. Significantly smaller than like the Vivo X100 Pro with that 1-inch sensor. I don't mind when it comes to dynamic range. It's nice and quick to take really, really beautiful photos with incredibly abundant shadow detail. A lot of that comes down to Oppo's processing, which is definitely more computational focused than Sony's. So if you're interested to know how Sony's Xperia 1 Mark V sensor performs in another device, this is a great one to show the range of the sensor. However, the depth of field isn't going to match a 1-inch sensor because it's smaller, so near roughly 1/1.5 inches of effective area. So you will get shallow depth of field at subjects nearer than a meter, but if you go beyond that, it's definitely going to fall short. With that periscope camera though, you can get such beautiful depth. It's got a 17mm focal length. And that's another thing I really love about this phone, the mix of focal lengths. It goes from I think 14mm, the ultra wide, right through to 24mm on the wide and 70mm on the periscope camera. That's much less reach than Apple's iPhone 15 Pro Max with its roughly 120mm range, but I prefer it. I prefer it for a couple of reasons. It's a focal length that I use more when I take photos, and also the focus, the nearest focus is around 25 centimeters. Apple's is roughly a meter, if not more. So it makes this so versatile. The portrait telephoto camera is virtually a macro camera as well, which is super convenient. Not quite Huawei 60 Pro levels of macro telephoto, but still on a foldable, it is the best that you're going to get. The ultra wide has a nice high resolution as well, and autofocus too. So you've effectively got 3-way macro photography on one device, and not just any device, the most powerful in terms of usability foldable that I've ever used. And so with all that, it's pretty clear why I think, in my very biased opinion, the Oppo Find N3 and the OnePlus Open are the best foldables out now. But like I said, it's been very validating to see the tech community also back me up on this one. Be interesting to know what you think. Would you consider a foldable? It's probably the closest you're going to get to a Sony foldable in a while, given the camera sensor in there. Let me know in the comments section below what you think. And if you want any more information on either of these devices, I would be happy to help. Thanks for watching.